What exactly is an accidental landlord? And how exactly does someone become an accidental landlord? In this podcast, we'll explore what it means to be an accidental landlord, as well as some of the pitfalls that an accidental or just a first time landlord should avoid when taking on the responsibility of managing one or more rental properties. We'll cover some common mistakes that can easily be avoided by taking simple preventative measures that help you be prepared for anything that the world of landlording might throw at you. Hi, everybody. My name is Chris, and I want to thank you for joining us for another value-packed TenantCloud podcast. If you want to be a more informed, better educated, and successful landlord, then stay tuned. With over a decade of property management experience, we bring you short and sweet, bite-sized pieces of incredibly valuable property management tidbits in 15 minutes or less. So typically, there are two types of categories of landlords out there. You have professional landlords, which they've been doing it for a long time. They went into it with intention. It was something that they either wanted to do since they were a child, or they knew that they wanted to have some type of financial independence, and they knew that real estate was the way to do that, and they went into it with this grandiose plan. And then there are the amateur landlords, which is great. There are actually a lot of amateur landlords. In fact, there are studies that show that there are potentially millions of amateur landlords out there. And the amateur landlords are generally referred to as accidental landlords. A lot of times they are people who never really treated their home as a long-term business investment, but they've become real estate investors due to life circumstances, or they had property and decided one day that I'm going to turn it into a rental. But really no plan surrounding it, no real business plan or structure around it. It was just kind of a last minute decision, like, you know what, I'm going to turn it into a rental. And so whether it's someone who has rented or inherited a property, or they just had property that they decided to turn into a rental for cash flow, or whatever the situation may be, a lot of accidental landlords are often seeking professional advice on rental management and passive income. And so these are a few of the things that we want to cover that are common mistakes that can be avoided by these so-called accidental landlords. And that may be you, and that's great, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with being an accidental landlord. In fact, I think it's fantastic. I think that just starting out and doing something is great. You're doing something that most people aren't doing. In fact, most people constantly talk about, think about, dream about doing stuff, and they never actually do it. So the fact that you're actually doing it, first of all, that's fantastic. Congratulations. Second of all, let's cover these quick tips so that we can help you potentially avoid some of the pitfalls that a lot of people do fall into, that your more professional landlords already know, and these are the things that they do on a regular routine basis. And so we're going to give you a little bit of that inside scoop on how to avoid these pitfalls. So the number one mistake that a lot of accidental landlords make is they don't analyze the rental market and property management trends. In fact, a lot of times they don't even understand it, and that's fine. If you're an accidental landlord, there's a good chance you're not a pro at any of this stuff, and you're just figuring it out as you go. So what this means is, for first-time landlords, it's essential that you get acquainted with your rental market conditions. You want to also be familiar and up to date on local property management trends in your region, not just nationwide, but in your actual region. And you want to know things like who your target audience is. For instance, we've talked about this a lot in a lot of our podcasts and a lot of our blogs, is who is your target demographic? It's just like any product that you have out on the market. You need to know who you are talking to. You need to have that, what's commonly called an avatar in marketing. You want to have this very defined individual who you know their name, their age, where they work, where their kids go to school, what they drive, all of that stuff. And you create this avatar, this common person that you would pitch your message to, that you would present your rental property to or your product to. And so it's important that you have that nailed down and that you're heavily focused on that for your rental market. So you can start with general, like, high view things like, okay, well, my target audience in this area because of the locale is the millennials or the Gen Z or Gen X or whatever it is. But you really want to narrow it down even more than that. You want to narrow it down to be more specific. And a lot of things that you can do just on a very general kind of one fits all type approach is you can start to introduce things like mobile apps and mobile communication and just more modern technology, because those things are all going to be common factors for pretty much any of the most recent generations. And so that's a good starting point, but you really do want to narrow it down a lot deeper than that. And there's a lot of resources out there to help you with that, but it's a good starting point to at least know who your demographic is in terms of generational details. Another tip is you want to make sure that you are treating your rental property as a business. You can't just rely on magical hidden property management talents to suddenly come to the surface that you didn't know existed. Like, that's not real life. You need to make sure that you are educating yourself and that you're acquiring the skills and the knowledge, such as through this podcast, that will help you to become a better accidental landlord. And so you do want to make sure that you're treating it as a business. Make sure that you're educating yourself. Make sure that you are constantly seeking out resources. Make sure that you're joining groups and seeking advice from people who have done it before and are successful at it. And you'll put yourself on a long road to success just by doing that. And at the same time, you also want to understand tenant expectations, and you want to be able to and ready to resolve any property related issues that may come up. And so that brings us to our second bullet point, or the second mistake that a lot of people make, which is they don't keep track of their budget. This is a big one, and I want to make sure that you do not just kind of gloss over this. It is extremely important that you keep track of your budget. A lot of times, people look at real estate investment and think that it is a get-rich-quick scheme, and it is not. It is far from it. And while it can be lucrative and it can be extremely profitable, and you can build a real estate empire or just own a few rental properties and generate rental income, all those things are true. But if you're not keeping track of your budget, you can end up in a world of hurt. And so it is extremely important that you keep track of and you're able to project your monthly income and expenses and develop a money-oriented mindset in a positive way and optimize your rental income and your rental business to account for both income and expenses. And it is extremely crucial. Again, I cannot emphasize that enough. But once you dive into a business routine and you develop those financial disciplines and you're able to project those things, you'll find that you're able to project a lot more and you're able to plan ahead a lot more. And you'll even be able to grow your real estate investment portfolio more quicker and faster. And taxes are not simple, but when it comes to doing your taxes, you'll find that it's a lot easier and a lot less stressful at the end of the year when you do your taxes if you're organized when it comes to your finances and your budget and you're keeping track of your income and expenses and so on and so forth. So you're going to have, as an accidental landlord, I think a lot of times the idea of expenses doesn't quite register. And so it will, though, when you get that first maintenance request, because that's when you suddenly realize, okay, there are definitely expenses that come with managing a rental property. And it's important that you know as a landlord what things you are responsible for in your rental, because you are going to have requests come from your tenants to take care of things. And so there's multiple points that we could dive into with that, but without getting too deep into it, you want to make sure that your lease carefully outlines what the tenant is responsible for and what they are not responsible for. And what they are not responsible for, by default, you are responsible for. And so you do want to make sure that your lease actually covers those things. That's the first thing. The second thing is you want to make sure that you have the funds set aside to address the things that you are responsible for should your tenants have an issue and put in a maintenance request for those things. And you also want to make sure that you're abiding by your local as well as any federal or state laws surrounding requirements for landlords for taking care of rentals and making sure that they're in livable conditions, and whether things like you're responsible for hot water and AC and things of that nature. So you just want to make sure that you're well informed and that your lease is well documented when it comes to factors that surround things that might end up costing you money. The third thing is, and this ties into this, is most accidental landlords do not understand their rights, and they don't understand their tenants' rights. And so that really ties into what we were just talking about, not just for maintenance things, but just in general for the rental property, for the lease, and like, for instance, military members being able to break their leases and what the stipulations are for allowing them to break their lease and things of that nature. So you want to make sure that as an accidental landlord, you are informing yourself and you are informing your tenants of both your rights and your tenants' rights. And a lot of those things can be and often are documented in actual lease contracts for residential real estate properties. But in general, you want to make sure that you have information and that you are well informed and keep up to date on what is required of you and what your rights are as a landlord. And the laws change sometimes depending on whether you are a landlord of a single rental property or whether you're managing a multi-family property or whether you're managing a duplex versus a fourplex, and whether you have one rental property or 10 rental properties. A lot of those things change, and the requirements and what's expected of you according to the law can change as well based on those factors. So again, you just want to make sure that you are staying informed as an accidental landlord what is required of you according to the law and the regulations, both locally in your state and on a federal level. The fourth mistake that a lot of accidental landlords make is they try to do too much. And what do I mean by that? A lot of them because they don't understand and they've never done property management before. A lot of people don't even realize that there's actually a lot of software solutions out there. And obviously, this being a TenantCloud podcast, we're going to plug in the TenantCloud software, which is specifically designed in many ways for the accidental landlord or the DIY landlord. And so one of the big things that we find is a lot of people start using TenantCloud software, and they come to TenantCloud not only from other software platforms, but people come from software platforms that they got onto that were bigger than what they needed for their management business, their property management business. So if you have 5 rental units, you probably don't want to go with an enterprise solution for your property management software because it has way too many tools, it's way too confusing. It's not designed for you. It's designed for someone who has 2,000 rental properties or 2,000 units. And so there are solutions that are available to DIY landlords or accidental landlords that are small enough, but yet have enough of the features or more than enough of the features to accommodate the various things that you need. But it's not overwhelming to the point where the learning curve is a year long because it has tools that are specific to big time property managers because it's an enterprise solution. And so, but it is important that a DIY or accidental landlord streamlines their property management or their landlording business, because it can eliminate a lot of the things that are tedious day-to-day tasks, like invoicing tenants or emailing tenants that an invoice is due or overdue, or that late fees have been applied, or having to manually charge late fee and invoices and track that manually, and manually scheduling maintenance requests, or having email requests come in through email and phone and text and so on and so forth, when you could have all of that in a single system. And so it's extremely important that even if as an accidental landlord who finds themselves managing 1 or 2 or 3 rental units, that early on the processes are established and early on things are streamlined and early on things are automated. And obviously that is one of the biggest parts about TenantCloud, and that's why it's one of the best, if not the best, DIY landlord or accidental landlord softwares out there, is because it helps the smaller landlords do that very thing. It helps to simplify their entire business. It helps to streamline it and automate it and just make things a lot easier. And on top of that, you don't want to be tied to your rental in a specific area. Just because you manage rental properties in, let's say, Houston, Texas, that doesn't mean that you need to be tied to that area. When you use a cloud-based software system, you're able to go anywhere. You can manage your rental property from literally anywhere in the world that you have an internet connection. And so there are huge benefits to making sure that you find the right property management software to fit that is a good fit for your rental management business and allows you to free up time and just create that extra freedom and ability to continue living life and not being tied down to a rental property just because you have a rental property in a certain city. And that pretty much ties up our primary, our four major, I guess you could call them mistakes that a lot of accidental landlords make. And hopefully these things provide some insight to you as an accidental landlord and allow you to help avoid these pitfalls that a lot of new landlords or accidental landlords make when first starting out, or even people who have been landlords for a long time still make some of these common mistakes. And so it's important to be reminded of these things, and we hope that this provided value to you. And if you have enjoyed listening to our podcasts, whether you've listened to this one or any of our past ones, we would absolutely greatly appreciate it if you would go on and write a review for us on the Apple Podcast platform, as that helps other people discover the TenantCloud podcast through your reviews. And also, if there's anybody that you can think of that would benefit from this information, feel free to share it with them. We would absolutely love that. And we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen to this podcast, as always. And we look forward to talking with you next time.